This is a revision presentation, really, about the main characteristics of globalization. The previous presentations on globalization have mentioned some of the effects that globalization has had on the world, and this presentation is really just a recap of the major characteristics or features of globalization. The first thing which we all know about globalization is that it has resulted in an increase in the value of trade that takes place in the world, that is, exports from countries to other countries. This is a definite effect of globalization because globalization involves the closer integration of economies around the world. Part of this is also the increase in the influence of multinational firms. A multinational is defined as a firm that has production capacity in more than one country. And multinationals are largely responsible for globalization because they have created the global supply chain, which drives the phenomenon of globalization. So multinationals have definitely become more important in the world as a result of globalization. Globalization has also resulted in an increased similarity of cultures around the world. Cultures have become similar because of the influence of global media, such as satellite TV. This has meant that people around the world are listening to the same music, watching the same fashions, etc. And so tastes and preferences around the world have become more similar. And some would say, of course, that this is a negative effect of globalization, but it certainly is a characteristic. A fourth characteristic is a reduction in the influence and power of national governments. When economies become integrated, such as in a free trade area like the European Union, individual governments within the free trade area lose some of their freedoms. For example, they lose the freedom to put tariffs on, obviously, on imports. And they also lose some other freedoms with regard to helping firms, because free trade is supposed to be without subsidies as well as tariffs. So power of national governments, some would say in a good way, is diminished by globalization. So there has definitely been a reduction in the influence and power of national governments. Number 5, the fifth characteristic of globalization is probably an increased volatility in financial markets. Here we mean stock markets, bond markets, even currency markets. And this is because globalization involves the free movement of financial capital. Money has to move freely around the world if world trade is to be truly liberated. And so this free movement of money creates very rapid flows of hot money across national borders, which contributes to a greater volatility in financial markets. And lastly, the sixth major characteristic of globalization is an increase in global GDP. Now, of course, global GDP could be going up for many reasons, and some people people who do not really support globalization doubt whether the growth in global GDP is really due to globalization or other factors. But those who support and are in favor of globalization would definitely say that globalization has brought about an increase in global GDP. So to summarize then, there are several characteristics that we can identify as being part of globalization. Trade has gone up in the world, multinationals are more important, cultures have become more similar, national governments have seen a decrease in their power, and financial markets have become more volatile, as well as the world GDP rising. So these are some of the factors to bear in mind when we think about the impact of globalization in the world.